Hey everyone, today I'm going over some new information involving Dragon's Dogma 2. If you missed the recent showcase, Capcom invited me to their headquarters in San Francisco to try the game hands-on without a time limit. This was apparently a build close to or exactly like the one used as the demo during TGS this year, but I had the ability to sit down with each of the demo classes and try them out. That being said, I mostly focused on Thief and Archer, as those two classes combined are what made up my favorite class of Strider within the original release. Additionally, I found the Archer demo to be the more interesting of the three, as it starts with a plot point and series of cutscenes that explain a better part of the storyline and how you became the Arisen. Capcom has also provided me with around 8 minutes of footage to go over, some of which has been used as clips on their social accounts. Some of this stuff you may already have an idea of because of that, but we get to see it in a bit more detail here.
This footage isn't exactly new. In fact, it's about a month old at least by this point, so you may have seen it circulating already. This is my first time with it, however, and hopefully I can discuss some newer concepts in the video that you aren't aware of due to having played the build myself.
If you enjoy this content, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. Without further ado, I'd like to discuss some of the upcoming elements of Dragon's Dogma 2 with you. I didn't mean for that to rhyme. First, I'd like to talk about things that I don't have footage of and then go over the footage more after that. The first thing I noticed when at the character select was that we had 3 vocations to choose from: Archer, Fighter, and Thief. Mage wasn't currently an option here, but it is clearly going to be, as we see pawns playing as mages within the demo, and I'm pretty sure they've announced as such previously. Additionally, the fighter class was a character created as the new Beastren race. This was confirmed previously, but it was cool to not only see it in action, but also have the opportunity to try it hands-on. Certain mechanics within the first game have marked their return. Things like your character weight based on how much they're holding at the time, allowing them to work through different stages of encumbrance that affect their stamina, meaning that the size and weight of your character will most likely continue to affect these things as well. The entire time I was playing, I was noticing how things like the aesthetic of the game and the UI are aggressively similar to the original. That's not a downside, of course. Dragon's Dogma always had a unique look and feel to it, and we're seeing that come back here, just accentuated by the graphical potential of the RE engine. While working through the item menu, everything was as I remembered it, just with a fresh coat of paint. Mechanics like combining items are still there, and you can, of course, equip a lantern whenever you want, and it will require oil to stay aflame. You'll be wanting to equip one regularly too, as nights get just as dark as you might remember. And interior dungeons are the same. The one thing about nights that I wasn't able to confirm was whether or not monsters got more powerful, but I imagine they kept that in considering how much this feels like playing an upgraded and expanded upon version of the first game. Also, lanterns aren't the only returning item. There's plenty you'll be familiar with as you play. Herbs to heal and meat for stamina. Plus, I found explosive arrows over by an archery range, although I couldn't figure out how to use them for some reason, and I felt too embarrassed to ask and take up time, so I didn't figure it out. I'm sorry. The newest item we ran into immediately was the camping kit. It was an understandably hefty item. My Thief quickly reached the heavy state of encumbrance, and when I looked to find out why, it was due to the kit weighing something like 7 kilograms. Around that. The kit is necessary to set up a temporary camp, but that camp needs to be set up at designated sites as far as I'm aware. While traveling, you will run into little campfires that you can interact with. When you do, you have the option of setting up your camping kit and are then given the option to experience the camp fully, or just use this as an opportunity to assign skills, meaning that an inn or shop is not the only place you can do this now. I wasn't able to get hands-on footage of the camp as it wasn't me playing at the time, but we saw that you could cook food at the camp and talk to your pawns, and I believe this might have made it into the showcase, although I'm not sure because I'm writing this beforehand. My best assumption is that this will be where we set our skills, maybe store items and set our pawn's inclination, which is an aspect of how they will act around you. Speaking of pawns, they seem to be just as elaborate a social mechanic as they were in the original game. Various rift stones can still be found across the map, but you no longer need to enter a separate zone in order to make use of it. In fact, the entire game seems to be seamless. Entering towns, dungeons, or the rift all took place without loading screens. The one time I saw a fade to black was while exiting the rift, but this was minimal. We even saw a goblin make it into a fort location, forcing us to kill it before being on our way. It makes me wonder if larger scale attacks within settlements will be a thing within the game, as I remember them showing a griffin flying over one of the cities in previous footage. You know, we had one or two aspects of that in the original Dragon's Dogma when you had to fight a cockatrice in Grand Soren, but that was more of an instance special case and not something that could just freely happen. So the Rift is seamless, and you can select a variety of pawns that show up to greet you or search for specific pawns that match your criteria. It's all the same as the previous game. You can still rate the pawns and give them a gift to take back to their arisen once you are done with them as well. The rating system has been streamlined though. Now you just choose if you liked the pawn, loved the pawn, or had no comment. Pawn knowledge is still a thing as well, meaning that they will be able to tell you of the weakness of different monsters based off of their previous experience, or learn from you during combat. Pawns were able to guide me to various quest locations because they had completed them before, and they even pointed out various gatherables to me that were marked on my map afterward. They're also as vocal as ever, something I'm sure a subset of players will be unhappy about, but something I always appreciated. They have plenty of new lines to say, and yes, you can high-five them, though this seems to be a random occurrence after battle and not an active choice. I'd say pawns are more vital than ever now considering the changes to certain vocations. You'll notice immediately upon playing the Thief or Archer classes that they have been specialized to focus on their specific strengths. In the original game, you had the Strider vocation, which could specialize into Ranger or become a hybrid class of Assassin or Magic Archer. Regardless of which you chose, you always had access to bows, daggers, and depending on the hybrid, sometimes swords and staffs. That's not the case here. Strider has been broken up into Thief and Archer respectively, with Thieves focusing on daggers and Archers on bows. In the previous game, we had a set of primary skills and potentially secondary skills, plus augments. I'm unaware if augments are even in the game, but you'll quickly see that we only have the option to use weapon skills, at least for the moment. Now each class instead has some sort of specific ability depending on which vocation you chose. The Archer, for example, can manually aim, while the Thief gets a step dash of sorts to make them more mobile. I assume this was to try and play on the uniqueness of each vocation and make them feel more special. As the Thief, I had the Swift Step ability plus a few special skills I could use at the time, and then I could select from a range of weapon skills by holding L1. The L1 skills seem to be swappable, but I'm not sure about the other two abilities that are assigned to square and triangle. These light and heavy attack options share the name of core abilities from the first game that the player could upgrade or obtain in order to unlock permanent passive benefits to their attacks and maneuverability. Additionally, you still level up your characters and vocations independently, but I am unsure if the vocation affects stat bonuses on level up anymore. It used to be that you would gain new stats for your character based on their current vocation, and I imagine that's still true here. Unfortunately, the demo had no hybrid or advanced classes to try, so I wasn't able to see any of them during my time within the game. Combat is as great as ever, and if you played the original game, you'll feel right at home here. The hardest thing for me to get used to was the changes to archery, though that was mostly with the controls. I had to press R1 to aim and then tap it again to shoot. If you didn't want to aim fully, the Archer has an ability called Loose that allows you to shoot more rapidly while auto-aiming, and they gave them a front kick attack as well for close range enemies. Thief, meanwhile, had a lot of returning abilities that I was used to, such as Biting Wind and Helm Splitter, so I felt very comfortable there. Your pawn can have augmentation skills assigned to them if they are of the mage vocation, and can imbue your weapons with elemental effects, making difficult battles become a cakewalk. And I just want to point out that I'm talking about elemental magical augmentations here, not the ones that you would assign to a specific character while selecting your skills. Sure enough, the spells themselves are as charming as ever. You're not just using a flamethrower or an ice thrower or a wind blower like certain other games. You have fireballs, giant ice spikes, the ability to levitate, and so much more. And I'm sure these are going to get even crazier as the vocation gets developed. In the original game, you could bring a meteor down from the sky. Just imagine what you could do now. And elemental attacks can affect the monsters you're fighting in various ways. We were fighting a griffin, and I never saw it light on fire, but I did see that happen to a Cyclops, suggesting it would be possible for most enemies. Setting a griffin's wings aflame was a great way to keep it grounded in the original. All of the monsters I have seen were returning creatures from the first game. Goblins, griffins, saurians, cyclopses, etc. And they all feel similar to their original counterparts with minor changes here and there. Hobgoblins and the like seem to have been scaled to appear larger, as an example. You can still break off tusks and cut off saurian tails here, so combat continues to feel satisfying in that regard. And I'm sure people will continue to compare the gameplay to that of Monster Hunter, or more relevant, Devil May Cry, considering this is an Itsuno game. And yes, you can still climb all large monsters. More importantly, you can actually ride a griffin now. I didn't do this personally, but observed it in the footage seen here, meaning you may be able to make use of these encounters to travel the map faster. And the map of the game is gigantic. I spent a lot of time just exploring and observing the sweeping vistas, and there were plenty of paths and routes to take regardless of where I was currently. Dragon's Dogma 1 and Dark Arisen really only opened up the world and areas once you reached Grand Soren, and many of those locations had linear paths to explore with some verticality. It seems that openness was taken more into consideration with this new release, and the RE engine continues to impress me here. The landscapes are beautiful, yet familiar, and many locations reminded me of Grand Soren or Casardis, and I swore I saw other locations I remembered off in the distance, but I was unable to venture out to see what they were exactly. If they showed footage in the showcase of me looking at a big cloudy tower off in the distance, you might be able to gauge what that might be, but nothing has been confirmed. One of the first things I did was venture to one of the major settlements and make sure I could still climb buildings, and sure enough you can. I jumped onto a balcony and passed through a building to find a chest, and then climbed onto the rooftops to explore. The physics seems to have been updated significantly as well. Standing on a slanted rooftop didn't just make me fall off of it, I actively lost my footing and slid downwards, and while in combat I watched someone else knock out a Cyclops who fell into a tree and slumped over onto it, allowing them to more easily attack the head by using the Cyclops as a ramp. It was awesome to see a monster of that scale be able to fully interact with the environment and basically ragdoll when it reels back. Plus, the world is full of wildlife for the monsters to interact with as well. This was an aspect of the previous game, but griffins will still come down to land in order to catch an ox for food. Animals like oxen and pigs flooded the plains, helping to bring more life to the open world, which was something of a criticism in Dark Arisen. In terms of story, I can't get into too much detail surrounding it, but I can discuss what we have seen in the footage provided, and what was most likely shown in the showcase as well. When playing the demo, the first quest you could do as the archer would trigger a cutscene and gameplay of the past featuring your character fighting a dragon that looks like Grigori. Whether it is or isn't Grigori is up in the air. Whenever the creature talked, its name was substituted with 3 question marks, so we'll have to theorize for now. I personally have a lot of theories regarding the cycle and what we learned from the first game surrounding things like alternate dimensions, etc. I talk about it a lot in the retrospective. Unfortunately, none of that was answered through my gameplay experience, so I have nothing to say on those points. Now let's delve into the footage I received in more detail. The first thing we see is the archer vocation fighting against some goblins. You can see what I meant here with them attacking and auto-aiming during combat. This move changes slightly while sprinting, allowing you to slide in order to close some distance or dodge while continuing to attack. Here's the footage of someone fighting the dragon. Similar to the first game, this seems to be a somewhat scripted fight in that it can't be beaten and ends after a certain amount of time. You can see the person here climbing all over it, which I never thought to do during my playthrough. I was too enthralled with the presentation to try anything crazy like that. Now here we see a Cyclops break out of some rocks by a shallow body of water. Considering the Archer demo started at level 5 and the presentation, I'm assuming this will be our first encounter with a larger monster that we can actively defeat. We can see the Cyclops get lit on fire. They also walk over to and pick up their club, which wasn't equipped originally. The Archer character seems to do a running jump into the back of the Cyclops here, and perform an aerial attack where they launch off of it. It made a sound suggesting it was a devastating blow, and I'll play that here real quick. However, it didn't seem to do much damage. I'm wondering if this is what caused it to stagger and almost fall over immediately after. This clip was on Twitter, but it showcases the destructible environments found in the game. Obviously, the land isn't fully destructible, and it looks like it's going to be some key locations like here where we blow up a wall that causes a flood. Most interesting here is how much damage this seems to deal, basically one-shotting the Cyclops. And our pawns even seem smart enough to head to higher ground instead of getting swept up in the water as well. There was another clip of Twitter featuring this bridge, but a Cyclops was the one that destroyed it. Here we see the fighter making use of the destructibility to get rid of some goblins that quickly get swept up by the brine, so yes, the brine is back, meaning no swimming. Perfect guarding seems to return to the game. You can see the fighter briefly let go of the defend button and time it again to block the Cyclops' attack at just the right moment. Here we can see the classic dive from the Griffin before we take part in a battle against it. You can see feather particle effects burst off of the creature with each attack. And finally you can see the player grappling onto the back of the Griffin as it takes flight, and you seem to be able to actively hold on while it ascends further into the air and travels to a completely different location. I'd actually love to know if we can jump onto the tower there and use the ballista to shoot it out of the sky. Apparently, this isn't scripted, so the levels of freedom seem to be staggering. Whenever people say there's no scripted events in their game, I never believe it. I've heard it a lot. It's almost never true. I would even call the cinematic Grigori fight technically scripted since it ends before you can potentially defeat him. I don't know if we consider that as scripted or not. Anyway. Like the thumbnail of the video says, Dragon's Dogma 2 is everything I have ever wanted out of a sequel so far. Updated combat that feels as engaging as the first game, and all of the mechanics that made the original release so special seem to be making a return. I can't speak for the entire game at the moment as I have yet to play it, but everything I have seen so far has been more than impressive, and I'm eager to play the full release in March. If you guys have any questions about things I may have missed or forgotten to talk about, feel free to ask in the comments. I can't promise I'll have an answer for everything for obvious reasons, but I'll try to answer what I can. Additionally, please consider liking and subscribing as it helps me make this content for you all. Thanks for watching, everyone.
上手に焼けました。